you in a long time.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the workshop. Mark, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, sounds good. Should I be waiting for people like Mike Hoffpar to drop in?
So Mike, I know, is traveling this week.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So, he may join late. He did join late at another workshop this week because he was on travel.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. So I figured if we have some people from the board just so they know what's going on, but if not, I guess we'll manage. We'll give like a minute or two just for people to drop in.
And that's fine. We'll share the recording immediately afterwards.
Okay. Sounds good. I have some here. In fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll start with just as people come in, they can see the slides. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the way I guess I'll get started. The way that I'll run this meeting is that I have these prepared slides. I'm going to be talking about a couple items that the ratings committee touched on this past year. And if people have any comments along the way, please feel free to raise your virtual hand, and I'll keep an eye on the screen just to see if people are want to weigh in. But please do make sure that, like, as I'm going through this, if something's not clear, if you have any questions, please do speak up. So just to get started, I'm Mark Lichtman. I'm the chair of the U.S. Chess Ratings Committee. I'm also a senior lecturer on statistics at Harvard. And so I've been in this business of ratings for quite a while. Want to just share with you some of the sorts of things that we've been covering this past year. So I'm going to be covering three particular items today. The first is to review with you our annual rating monitoring analysis, which is something that we've been doing now for roughly 25 years. I want to share what the results have been. The major new thing I'll be talking about this year is this newly developed rating, so-called variance measure, which I'll describe in some detail. So this is something that we've been working on for a while, and we submitted a proposal to the executive board, and we're going to now consider the next steps in how to proceed with this measure. And then finally, this last bit is more of an FYI to let you know that, as you're probably aware, that FIDE had updated some aspects of its rating system, and that had some impact on the USCF updating of ratings as they relate to updating FIDE ratings. And I wanted to share some of that information with you. That's probably the least of the critical pieces that I wanted to talk to you about today. Before I get started, are there any burning questions or clarifications I can address right now before we get started? I'll take that as a no, since I don't see any virtual hands up. Okay, so I want to explain to you what we've been doing when we've been monitoring ratings over time. Essentially, what we've done, and again, we've been doing this for about 25 years, is that we identify a subset of players each year that we consider to be players who are generally stable in their ability. And that basically means people that have that are active in the current year. So like if I'm talking about identifying people who are stable in the year 2023, which is the most recent year we've been able to perform this analysis, take players who are active in 2023, as well as being active in the previous 3 years, meaning that they've been playing in tournaments all those 4 years. They have to be players that are between 35 and 45 years old, because those are players who are generally not improving quickly or getting worse appreciably. And then finally, the players must be established players in all 4 years, or at least by the end of the year. So these are players that do not have provisional ratings in the early years of these 4 years. So the goal here, so using that set of players, we could just simply examine what is the average rating of that set of stable players and reperform that analysis every single year as a sliding 4-year window. And so this table here shows you what this analysis has looked like over the last, I don't know, how many, so 20, 25, 30 years, I can't even count. There are a lot of years. Arithmetic is not my strong suit here, unfortunately, so I should be able to figure this out quickly. Richard, you want to tell us how many years there are here?
No, Mark, my question was just why has the N been dropping over time? It seems to have dropped substantially, at least since 96 to 2023.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know why, but I certainly know that what this basically means is that the number of players who are established 4 consecutive years and who are between 35 and 45 years old and who are active over 4 years has basically been dropping over time. The number of players that are active members, I think, have been relatively dropping over time. And so the fact that this is, by the time you get to 2010, it's been relatively stable, sort of in the 600s. But, there's been a precipitous drop going from the mid-1990s down to, around 2010.
So that's just a USCF
observation
then. So that's an observation then.
It's an observation, right? Yeah,
I
don't have any explanation for why this particular set of players in this characterization would decrease over time. Caleb?
Something I wonder maybe explains it. I don't know if it's correct or not, but maybe it's like just middle-aged players are perhaps becoming less active, or there's just less of them over time. Does that seem to be backed up by the data? Is that be a reasonable possibility?
I don't know if it's more of a function of players in that age range being less active, or just simply there are fewer that are just active members of US Chess. I don't know how. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Again, that's not for the purposes of the kind of analysis that we're doing, that's not the main intent. I mean, clearly this is an interesting aspect or side effect of this analysis, to see that the number of players, at least in this particular subgroup, is decreasing over time. And it probably would be worthwhile more generally, not from the ratings committee, but more generally, to understand what subgroups of players are dropping out over time, and maybe figuring out some way of increasing retention. But that's, again, not in the ratings committee's purview. Just something to think about, though. What we do notice, though, and what we've been paying attention to, is we want to make sure that the mean rating of this group is relatively stable. And if it's not, then what the ratings committee does is it recommends a particular type of change to the rating system, namely changing the bonus point threshold as a way of injecting or removing points from the system. So you can see, somewhat not surprisingly, over the last couple of years, that ratings have deflated a little bit. I say not surprising because with the pandemic, you would typically have players, particularly young scholastic players, that were improving quite a bit and not having the ratings show or catch up with their abilities, because they're not able to play in over-the-board chess. And so what happens is that once they start playing again, they're underrated, and they start basically taking points away from players who are more stable, and that creates deflation in the system. So what we did last year is we recommend lowering the bonus point threshold by 2 points, which is a way for players who are performing particularly well will end up earning more rating points, and that injects more points into the system. What we were seeing is that the decrease is slowing. It's not reversing quite yet, but we decided as a committee that we would not take further steps to monkey around with the bonus point threshold. So we wanted to actually give it a year or two to see what happens. And so that's basically where we are with this analysis.
But it would be too quick to really even show up so far, right?
It might be too quick, which is why we wanted to wait another year before before possibly taking more action, for example, to reduce the bonus point threshold even further. That's right. Tom?
Why 1997?
Totally arbitrary. I mean, that we made that decision ages ago,
Okay,
and we just want to be consistent with it. So it's not like something we decided now.
okay,
But no, there's no particular rationale for it being 1997. We just needed to set the standard somewhere, and so we just
gotcha.
set it 1997, and we've been consistent with that goal ever since.
So you're actually using the 1836 number.
Yeah, so basically we're aiming for roughly around 1836, exactly. So I can show you what this looks like, and so you don't have to stare at numbers. So this more or less is a graph version of those numbers, particularly this middle piece. These are actually the median ratings over time for this group of players as the group changes over time. And so you could see basically like in 1997, here's where the roughly the average or the median rating was. There was deflation going into 2000 that started reversing itself, so that in the early 2010s, we were kind of where we wanted to be. And now we're slightly experiencing some deflation, and we're trying to counteract that right now. This analysis, these four other lines are different parts of the distribution of players. So this is targeting, the top 5% of players. If you examine what the top 5th percentile of the distribution of ratings is, this is what it's following. And so actually, it's hard to read too much into this, but it does seem to be saying that relative to these earlier years, the top 5 percentile of players seems to be quite a bit higher than what it was back in, say, 1997. And meanwhile, the lowest 5 percentile among these 35 to 45-year-olds is a little on the low side. And may just simply, the reason I say there's not too much to read into this is it may just be more of an artifact of players' abilities, this group of players having a more diverse range of abilities than it was in 1997. So I wouldn't read too much into that kind of variation in the ratings. The more important part, I think, is really focusing on this middle curve. And that's the one that as a committee, we're mostly focused on.
So are you saying then that the bell curve of your established players that we're using from here is maybe
Bell curve. What's a bell curve in this situation? There's no bell curve.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, just the average of all of these. That's what this is, right? So the 95th percentile and the 5th percentile are the two tails of, I'm assuming, the bell curve of all.
It's not a bell curve. It's whatever the distribution of ratings is, which is not bell shaped. It's
really?
actually, it's a little skewed.
Skewed up or down?
I believe it's skewed slightly upward.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason it should be a bell curve. It is what it is. Whatever players happen to be like playing is what the distribution of ratings is going to look like.
Okay.
There's no theoretical reason it should be normally distributed. In case you're curious, this is, we also do this analysis by different age ranges. This is what the 30 to 40-year-olds look like. It's roughly the same kind of story, that the ratings are decreasing, but we're not using 1997 as a standard for the 30 to 40-year-olds, but you could still see what the shape, this curved shape of the average ratings decreasing and then increasing again in the 2010s, and then you could see this slight decrease over time, again indicating some deflation even for the 30 to 40-year-olds. And then we do the same thing for 40 to 50-year-olds. So we look at all these different age ranges and see basically the same pattern. So that's not the only analysis that we do for monitoring ratings. We also examine rating floors because they can give some interesting insights into whether the rating system is working or not. And so I want to just make clear that if there were no rating floors and you think about like what the distribution of ratings would look like in any 100-point interval, you would expect just at random that 1% of players would have a rating that ends in 0-0. You'd have 1% that end in a rating of 0-1, 1% ending in 0-2, and so forth, approximately. And so what you can do is with the rating floors, you could say, well, all right, let me look at the frequency of players that have this 0-0 rating, and then basically say, well, how much bigger is that frequency relative to that 1% that I would expect if there was no rating floors. So the actual percentage of players at ratings that end in 0-0 is giving an idea for how much rating floors are distorting ratings. And so let me show you the following graph. So if you take all players, and this is everybody, this is not age-based anymore, this is not the same cohort, but this is using established ratings every year. If you examine the percentage of players that have ratings that end in 0-0, who have established ratings between 1400 and 2199, what you would hope, if the rating system is working, that 1% of 1% of all the established players would have ratings that end in 0-0. But what we're seeing is that upwards of, going back to the early 90s, we were seeing like, 6.5%, 8%, up to 12% of the players were at the rating floor. Well, actually not 12%, it's 12% minus 1%, because 1% would be at 0-0 just naturally from, normal variation in rating updates. But 11% of players were at the rating floor. There's a good explanation for this occurring in 1996, because this was at a point where we had 200-point rating. We ended up having 100-point rating floors and no counteracting measure to offset ratings from reaching their floor. And then in 1997, we enacted this 200-point rating floor, so players had a chance to drop in their rating floor. But the main thing, I don't want to focus so much on the history, but I do want to focus on what's been occurring more recently in like the last 10 years, because you could see that that already the percentage of players at the rating floor is already a little uncomfortably high, even as of 2015, say, where this is like 5% of players have ratings that end in 0-0, which means that 4% of players are approximately at the rating floor, but it's only getting steadily higher over time. So in 2023, there were roughly 10% of players that had ratings ending in 0-0, which means that roughly 9% of players are at the rating floor. So there's a problem. We're not sure exactly what it is, but this is something that is going to need to get addressed before the problem gets too bad, and then we basically have players that are living on the rating floor. Richard?
Oh, yes, Mark. I'm sorry. What makes this a problem rather than sort of the natural consequence of the rating floor policy?
Well,
Because I know
people, so if people are on the rating floor, presumably what that ends up meaning is that they're actually worse than what the rating actually is landing on. So like if you're somebody on your rating floor at 1800, and we have this problem that seems to be getting worse, that that there's some kind of deflation for players that are getting worse, then your rating is actually not an accurate measure of your ability. And that's going to end up causing, causing more distortion in ratings, because your opponents are not going to be rated accurately against you.
And I mean, just to take that a little further, what I'm saying here is the people that I know who are continually bouncing off their floor are, to be blunt, aging players.
Yep.
And the consequence of there being, fewer players, as you were noting in your age range who were stable, means that we have a higher percentage of aging players working off of their rating floor. And I understand your problem about that being a distortion to some of the rating as an accurate reflection of your ability, but it seems just the inevitable consequence of having a rating floor policy.
If I'm understanding what you're implying, I think what you're saying is that if we didn't have something like rating floors, then these people would get upset and leave US Chess and not be playing anymore. Is that
No, I don't know the reasons that the rating floor policy is in place. I'm just saying that taking the rating floor policy as a given, this seems like a natural result.
Well, it doesn't have to be a given because there are plenty of other rating systems that are implemented outside of US Chess that don't have rating floors. It's not inevitable to have a rating floor. There are probably other things that we could do. I think there's the rationale that I just gave, playing devil's advocate, of saying that, you know, if we didn't have rating floors, then people might get too discouraged and leave playing competitive chess. That's the rationale that I've heard over many years for why we are basically stuck with these rating floors. But to be clear, it's not inevitable. I mean, this is a fairly rare case of a rating system that has this particular policy. And we're only doing it, I think, for more, you know, more membership-based reasons, or this perception that if we didn't have it, people would probably, the aging players in particular, would probably leave in droves. We don't know if that's true, but that's the hypothesis here.
Now, that's an interesting one, because my understanding had been that the rating floor was to put at least a cap on the amount of manipulation anyone could do to their own rating.
Well, we have other
prevent sandbag.
we have other methods that we can use to combat the outcomes of rating manipulation. Like, we can certainly now easily track players, for example, who do well in, you know, large prize events, and you know, who do poorly in low prize events. Like, we, you know, if we want to target, you know, rating manipulation for the purposes of you know, being eligible for you know, for large prizes, we could do that through other methods. It doesn't have to be through ratings, which is not a great, in my opinion, not a great use of ratings. But that's just me. Caleb?
Yeah, so two questions about this. One, so I can always see it looks like the percentage of, you know, players at 0-0 has like doubled since 10 or whatever. So I'm wondering what kind of conclusions we can draw from that data. And then my second question is, what exactly are you recommending be done here about the rating floors? Are you proposing to get rid of them? Is there something else you're looking for? I mean, what exactly you're proposing?
Yeah, well, so right. So I don't know. So what this means is that players who are getting worse, or not, you know, not able to keep up their ability, are not having the ratings tracked accurately because their floor prevents the ratings from going further down. So the problem is that we have an increasingly large number of players whose ratings are not representative of their ability. And so if the goal of the rating system is to be able to track your ability, this is at odds with this, with that goal. So that's the problem. What the solution is not very clear. You know, in the best of worlds, we would be able to get rid of the rating floors, but I think that would meet against, like, I think way too much pressure from I think organizers and probably the executive board. So I'm not even sure that that might be a non-starter. I don't have like a really great idea for what to do about this. I mean, I suppose there are some, you know, there's some cute ideas where, you know, you could keep track of these players' ratings as they would be calculated if there were no floor, and keep that part of the system. And when you do rating updates, do the rating updates relative to these like hidden ratings that are actually lower than what are presented. That's an idea that's been floated around for a while. And maybe that's something that can be.
So two things that come to mind is, one, you could go back to what was done like in 1997 and just increase the number of points for the rank force. So it went from 100 to 200, maybe you could take it up to 300. And another possibility might just be, if you were trying to get rid of it.
Are you saying lowering the rating floors?
Well, I just means like it was. I think like currently it's like rating for is like 200 points below.
Yep.
Current, so maybe it could be changed like 300 or 400. Would be a possibility. And you could
Yeah, I mean,
grandfather.
that might run into the same kind of problem of just simply removing them. I mean, it's not as bad clearly, but yeah, that might also face the same kind of the same kind of issue of just like suggesting getting rid of rating floors. I mean, I suppose it might be viewed as a little bit of a slippery slope, but I don't know. I'm on your side. Anything that can get rid of rating floors entirely, in my mind, is a positive. Whether it's done in a way where we're showing it, or whether it's done in this latent way that I was just describing, where you keep this hidden rating as part of the system and do all the updates relative to the hidden rating, but meanwhile people retain their published rating, which is still has a rating floor attached to it.
I would think something that would make it easier if you made any kind of change rating to rating floors would be the grandfather and the people who currently have rating floors and keep those, but just restrict it going forward for people that don't have floors yet.
I mean, I guess you could do that. I mean, it sort of feels to me that like if you were to do that, it sort of mixes in this idea that players sort of entitled not to have their ratings drop too far, which again, like if you're either, I don't know, you're either like for the idea of having rating floors, or you just don't, you don't see the point of it. I mean, I understand like you're coming up with these compromises, and probably that's the sort of solution that would be acceptable, but yeah, it's certainly something that's possible. Let me move on to other people have their hands raised. Adam, I think I see you raise your hand next. Adam Porth.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Idaho for you guys that don't know me. A question and then a point of that might help. If you're at your rating floor, are you able to request a lowering of your limit? Because we've got people that are on their rating floor for the past 10 years. So I would hope if they wanted to play in a national tournament, if they wanted to actually have any chance at prizes, they'd want to play at their natural rating, whatever that is.
Yeah, I believe players can request to have their rating floor dropped, and it's done on a case-by-case basis, and it's not something that's like advertised widely, but I believe it is.
Yeah.
It is possible, and it's done, but it's not very common. And frankly, most players, I don't think, generally want to request to have a lower their floor lowered.
Yeah.
I mean, except in the cases that you're mentioning where, they feel like they're being deprived of the opportunity to play in sections that, they can be competitive in.
Yeah, okay, so then another concept here with the rating floor, it's actually helping increase the ratings of some of our lower players that actually are not low. They're actually higher.
Yeah,
playing.
Yeah, but I think it does it to the players that really generally don't. I mean, if you step back and look at the whole rating system, it is resulting in a little bit of inflation, but it's inflating the wrong people. The problem is that if you're somebody on your rating floor and you're just playing some random opponent who may or may not be underrated or overrated, the likelihood is that if you're playing them and you're at your rating floor, which means that you're actually worse than your rating, then they're going to gain rating points relative to you, and they shouldn't be. So it's the wrong players that are getting the injected points into the system, and that's that's why it's like it does bring in some inflation, but it brings it to the wrong place in the rating system. The bonus.
Okay, and then
the bonus points.
Yeah,
good.
I'll just leave you with this idea. Maybe for people that have been on their floor for a significant long, period of time, they have again go back to a provisional rating until they can demonstrate that they can play at a particular level. So that's just an idea.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, that kind of thing I like. I'm gonna write that. I mean, I like that idea because that's consistent with a lot of other things that I've thought about over the years. Yeah, so basically that their rating essentially becomes more uncertain. once they hit the rating floor, and then you can give an opportunity for them to either improve, have the rating move upward a lot or downward a lot. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Thanks for mentioning that, Adam. Just going to jot that down for certain / provisional. Alan?
I think Michael had his hand up first.
Okay, I saw you're up first, but yeah, I'm fine with Michael. Michael, again. You're muted. You have to start again, Michael.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
No worries.
At the same comment, about inflation from the floors, but it does hit the wrong people, as you said. But there's a second order effect that the points are in the group, and so if there would be a second order reassembling of getting the ratings, just not the efficient way of actually getting the improving players directly to get their rating up, which is what.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so you're right. Right, they're in the system, and so they'll eventually make their way to the right players. I would have a lot of trouble arguing that that's like a good defense for having rating floors, because there are other ways that you could do it more efficiently if you have a choice of where the points are going to go.
But I know you're frustrated with the whole floor concept, and it's not something that we control. The board came up with this idea.
Yeah, many years ago.
We
Sure.
would have to have a strong case, just because
Right,
changing the status quo is always harder than staying where we are.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, that's why I think we have to do a little bit of brainstorming about, within the construct of the current system, how we might, deal with this. I mean, of the ideas that we've been tossing around, they're all really good ideas and interesting compromises. The one that to me it seems really interesting is this idea of like doing something like having the players become provisional again, or something that's close to that. But that's something to toss around with the ratings committee. Alan?
Yeah, I think you're coming at this from the wrong direction in a way. Back when I was on the rating committee, which I think was 95, when we passed this rule.
Yeah, not too long ago.
The committee was unanimously opposed to rating floors, and I doubt that that's changed.
Yeah.
And my feeling is there are two perceived good reasons for rating floors, or two things that people perceive as the reason for rating floors. One is for players to be protected against losing their rating when they lose their strength. And the other is to protect the system from sandbaggers who purposely lose rating points.
Right. So I don't know if you heard what I was saying, what I was discussing before. So those two particular those two issues. The first one is not a purpose of, like, the rating system is not intended to do anything other than measure strength. So if people want to be protected about their ratings, then that's like this extra aspect of ratings that is, part of the. I recognize that.
Let me finish, because I was going somewhere with this.
Okay, good.
The point being that regardless of whether you or I feel the rating system is designed to do that, that is how it is perceived. And the US Chess has an obligation to the members to give the members something they want. Now, a comparable system is in other non-chess rating systems. They have a distinction between your current strength and your lifetime achievement. And the attempts by the board, I believe without the consultation of the rating committee, to add the so-called lifetime titles was a horrible failure, largely because I won't say the math behind it was flawed. I'd say there was no math behind it.
Wait, are you talking about the Norman title system?
Yeah.
Oh no, the math was super solid. It just was the marketing wasn't done.
Well, I'm talking about the one that came out before that.
Oh, before that. Oh yeah, I don't know anything about. Yeah, I had nothing to do.
Where essentially, it was unlike, for example, titles in FIDE, you have to have performances in excess of a grandmaster performance to get a grandmaster title. In the case of the original norm system, players who had never achieved a rating over 1800 could easily get a Class A norm.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it wasn't calibrated. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, it wasn't calibrated properly,
Yeah.
but the concept is probably good to satisfy that need. But I would certainly
Yeah.
warn the executive board and the rating committee that if you're gonna try something like that again, get it right.
Yeah, I mean, well, the part of the problem is that, you know, any kind of change, any kind of major change, you have to get, you know, you're gonna have to get real buy-in from, you know, the top people in the organization. I mean, just to be really clear, Alan, there's nothing de facto, you know, needed to have like a rating floor. Like, I mean, there are other chess rating systems, including lots of online chess rating systems that have nothing to, there's no rating floors anywhere. And they work perfectly fine. No one cares. And, you know, they function perfectly fine. US chess is very
agree with
unusual.
that. But remember, the US chess rating system, and this is something that the rating committee has to acknowledge, as well as the executive board, is it's trying to be all things to all people.
Right, but we can also
not only, or at least all people have their own idea of what the rating system ought to be. And
sure, but we have an opportunity.
like
More than half the players are young players, so this is the time to make the cultural change.
you know, and again, the rating system used in most of the online systems are not being used for $100,000 prize funds.
No, but they're the ones that are probably taking all the players away from US chess, though.
There's that.
Yeah,
But what used to happen, and this is the other end of the problem, and I never understood why this was abandoned, because of the fact that the ratings were published and had to fit in a magazine and print kept getting smaller and smaller. We dropped this code. We used to have a code that showed peak rating. So my rating is currently, I'm not going to say, my rating is currently very low, but my peak rating was much higher. So I would have, well, now you have the room. You could show on the rating reports, and when they're dealing with the new system, you could easily show what my peak rating was. My peak rating was 2090, and my current rating is 1787. And both of those are meaningful and valid. But my point was, going back to the beginning about cart before the horse, is yes, you don't have to get buy-in in order to come up with a proposal. You have to come up with a proposal in order to get buy-in. And unless either the rating committee or somebody else, but the rating committee seems like a natural person, comes up with a proposal that says, hey, we propose that you handle this perceived problem with the rating system this way, and you handle this perceived problem the other way. And by the way, we, the rating committee, perceive the graph that you're showing us as a serious problem. And here's how we can approach them. But I think it has to be done piecemeal and a little at a time. If we started publishing peak ratings, okay, which are not as useful as the norms, not as meaningful as these calculated norms, but still have some value, I think that would, if people got used to that, that would eliminate that. And certainly as an organizer, if I have somebody enter my under 1800 section and it shows his peak rating was 2150, well, I'm going to look closer at that. If somebody enters the under 1800 system and his peak rating was 1850, I don't have a problem with him. And as you say, if he's manipulating his rating, we can find that out by other ways. And that's the third thing I would say the rating committee should come up with a proposal for, is explicitly, let's routinely run these sandbag hunters, these diagnostics, and have a committee, either a committee of the executive board or a committee of a subcommittee of the rating committee, or somebody whose job was to evaluate these and determine that certain people are sandbaggers, and just essentially have the authority to assign a minimum rating to those people. Okay, if we only assign minimum ratings to the people that we have evidence are manipulating the system, and I'm talking about statistical evidence, not proof.
Sure.
Okay, I don't have to prove that you're artificially keeping your rating below 1800 in order to say I'm not going to let you into the below 1800 section. If statistically your rating is getting manipulated, somebody would have the authority to set specific minimum ratings instead of automatically doing it based on your peak rating. That would possibly satisfy the people who want minimum ratings for that reason. And it would eliminate, and statistically, I think the number of people that would actually have those minimum ratings assigned would not cause the kind of inflation we're talking about.
Yeah, it's unclear to me that, like, you know, the sandbagging is really the source of this particular problem that we're talking about, with the people just increasingly being at their floors.
No, I think the problem is caused by, as I think I forgot already who said it, as Richard said, the existence of the rating system sort of implies you're going to get this kind of graph, or the existence of floors. So the question is, why do we have floors? Can we not have floors, or can we limit it? So we say that we're only going to have floors for the people we think really need them.
Yep.
And that might drop this graph to 2%. And 2% I would think would be acceptable.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that's something that, and I remember back when I was on the rating committee, Tom Doan was doing a lot of this analysis, and we now, and he was doing it by scraping data. Now we have the data available. We could be.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I was going to mention later, that like once the new platform is up and running, you know, there are probably a bunch of diagnostic scripts that we can develop and just like have run periodically, and that'll address a whole host of issues, you know, including, you know, finding players that are manipulating ratings, all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
But let me make sure I get everybody to weigh in.
Yeah, no, I'm done talking. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. John, I think you were up next.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry I was late. One thing I want to put on your radar from the EB on the topic of floors is one of the neatest things that's gone on in US chess over the past year or so has been some of the advances in senior chess, specifically our participation internationally, but also the creation of the US senior women's tournament. One of the real challenges, and obviously this is not just a ratings issue, but also our invitational requirements and top players, but when you actually start to look at the invitational lists, quite a few of the players actually on both the men's and the women's senior sides are at their floor. Yeah. And so floors are creating a real situation that you wouldn't generally think of when you're thinking about the players at the top of the game. But there's definitely something where there are a few individuals who have very high floors due to, you know, being very, very strong chess players in the past, who by virtue of having that floor kind of locked into participation in a lot of events moving forward. And so we're going to need to figure out a solution that is both recognizing of their great achievements, but also equitable moving forward. So I know that's what we've been talking a little about lately, and I'm sure there's more to come.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that, John. In fact, you know, it's sometimes in order to light a fire, you know, you need to kind of see, you know, these stark situations like you're describing that basically necessitate a solution for a problem. So yeah, so we can work on that.
Yeah, and I'll be socializing it more at the US Open because, like I said, I don't want to make this just a ratings problem.
Yeah, but I mean, it's related.
Invitational requirements and stuff, but
yep. No, that's I'm glad you mentioned that. I wasn't aware of that issue.
Yeah, and Mark, I can share more information with you offline too, and the committee if it's helpful.
Okay.
John
Michael,
and Mark.
I think Michael's next.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're trying to do virtual hands just so I can call people as they raise their hand. Yeah, Michael?
My point is just that I think the variance measurement can be a better way to find manipulating ratings than using floors as a punishment. Because if you have a direct algorithm that is giving you information, you don't have to have a meeting and people decide this guy looks suspicious. You just see this person has a huge variance. You know, we're going to affect how that lets him enter or her enter different events.
Yeah, so I could talk more about that. I was hoping that the variance measure would not be used that way because I don't think it's necessarily meant to capture rating manipulation. It's just meant to capture natural variation in players' abilities. Like
It'll
if
get
we're
both.
gonna, well, except
can't
if
separate
people are
them.
manipulating ratings, I mean, you can kind of game things where you can make sure you don't look like you're having like such a huge variance, and you might start flagging people that have naturally high variation when in fact they're not manipulating ratings. So I would say, like, if you want to actually figure out if people are manipulating ratings, like target like the ways that they might be manipulating it, like doing poorly in low stakes events and doing well in high stakes events. Daniel?
All right. A couple of things. One, that just to add on to what John was saying about seniors, with more FIDE events, what's happening to them is that their USCFs are staying the same and their FIDE ratings are going down tremendously. So then they get paired differently because one term's using USCF or FIDE. Some of the seniors that I know are refusing to renew their membership because they're sitting on a floor and stuff like this. It's gotten to a point where I think if a player complains about their floor, the office should take a closer look, and the ratings committee should take a closer look at that player's entire MSA history. Because there will be a few who do it, and even people who've done it over the last 1 to 4 years. So that's one thing. And then I'm not sure if the committee has looked at what happened this spring nationals, but at the spring nationals, we had to make a lot of rating adjustments on the fly for players because the rating conversion factor using FIDE ratings for scholastic players under 1900, the conversion that was provided was so far off that it was causing a problem to pair the terms. So
when was this?
The council members and the chief tournament.
Which convert, like, when did this happen?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, when did this happen?
This was during the spring nationals this year.
Okay, and were they using the converted ratings that we updated?
Yes, but the problem was that those converted ratings for any scholastic player under 1900 were 200 points off. It was just, so a player would have a low FIDE rating, it would get updated to the new FIDE rating, and then their USCF was so far off what it really was in terms of current strength. We had to ignore the conversion and just say use USCF regular. And it was complicated.
Why weren't they using USCF to start with? I mean, they should always be using USCF for USCF rating. For USCF events, they should always be using USCF ratings.
The problem is because there's more FIDE rated sections now that players are getting FIDE ratings, and then we are required to look at every single player's rating prior to attending a national scholastic. Mike Hoffpower has done an incredible job with the algorithm to review all the ratings, but we ended up using USCF regular for almost everyone in this sort of situation.
Yeah,
but it just should. Right. But at the same time, it's just something to review that the conversion rate for lower rated USCF and FIDE rated players didn't translate as well.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been updated from like matching players between the two systems in a while anyway. So we're going to be on schedule to do that exercise in any case. I mean, it does sound like what you're describing was a lot more work than you needed to, in the sense of, if you have USCF ratings, you might as well rely on them.
Right. The problem, one of the issues was that it occurred in March, and we didn't have a lot of time to react because the first nationals was first weekend of April. So the high school chief TD and the high school SC rep had a lot of work to do to unpack it all in a very short window.
Yep.
And then they basically gave us the playbook for what to do for the other national events in the spring. So it survived. Yes, Richard is providing something in the comment. Yeah. So it's just something to note in terms of scholastic players that if they don't have a lot of FIDE history, then the conversions get somewhat off. And I'm not sure how to fix that numerically other than just running numbers, but at the same time, like, we just have to know how to nuance it and avoid the problem.
Right, and so basically, just so you know, the pathway forward is, we have this conversion from FIDE to USCF that's supposed to be used for, like, specifically for either FIDE events entirely that are not USCF rated, or they're supposed to be used for converting US players that don't have a USCF rating but have a FIDE rating and convert it back to the USCF scale. So the description that you're making doesn't fall into either of those categories. So somebody was like, kind of trying to be creative in the way that they were using that conversion somehow.
Yeah, I mean, Al, you wrote something in the chat. The council, what we were doing this spring was using our review group with the chief tournament directors to basically unresolve that issue for players that we looked at the history for manually. So the algorithm would flag all the players who are in this sort of situation. Al?
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I think Mark may not be aware or may have forgotten about what the Scholastic Council does in terms of ratings and how many non-USCF ratings they use in addition to the USCF rating. And that's not going to change. But Mark and I might agree that it's
outside of FIDE. I mean, are you talking about players who have? I mean, if you're talking about players who have FIDE ratings but not USCF ratings.
No, the Scholastic Council says for the National Scholastic Tournaments, every rating that a player has is considered. So if a player has a Washington State rating, or a FIDE rating, or a ratings.com rating, that's looked at and converted, and the object is to keep somebody who is really, and I'll put that in quotes, really a 1700 player from playing in the under 1700 section.
Yeah.
Mark and I might both disagree with the Scholastic Council's motives for this, but that is what they're doing.
Okay.
And
but I'm saying, like,
they
as,
do it well. I mean, I will
official
say
USCF policy, we don't have like an official USCF procedure to do that. So if the National Scholastic Council is basically applying some algorithm, they're not doing anything that the ratings committee has sanctioned.
But they were relying on the rating committee formula for converting FIDE to USCF for this purpose. Now that formula is no longer
right, but it's good. Well, any kind of conversion is going to be a very noisy conversion. I mean, it's it's hard. Okay, if you're basically saying, like, UCF, the UCF rating is like out of date and the FIDE rating is much much more current, and so that you want to factor in the FIDE rating, I understand that you want to have an accurate FIDE to USCF conversion. And so we have a formula that works well on average, or it has worked well the last time we did the conversion. We are going to be updating that conversion once we have, like, I think we have to wait for the dust to settle with FIDE ratings after this big change anyway. But we're going to do that conversion, and we're going to have new formulas, which may address some of what you're talking about.
No, it will. It will. We needed a new formula because the formula as it existed after the FIDE ratings updated in March, it got thrown way off for a lot of players. So we had to basically go to square one for the spring, which sometimes happens. It's a good thing to have a manual check on the algorithm to evaluate issues in real time when it comes to this. And at the end of the day, the goal was to try to pair the tournament as equitably and fair as possible. We have to deal with Washington ratings. We have to deal with players who have Chess Express ratings or other things. It's become less of an issue. When we had the online ratings, we had a very loose policy. And generally we've had somewhat of a loose policy about it. But the issue really is that if one person goes out of their rating range, plays the tournament and wins, we have drama and chaos on our hands. And that's what we're trying to avoid. It's the idea that, for these undersections, people care way too much about them. And granted, they should. They're going and traveling and playing a National Scholastic. But then it gets crazy. It's just one of those things where if we're all on the same page when a change happens, we can get on the same page about various things. And this was just one of the things that came up just this year in relation to the new FIDE ratings when they came out. And it affected a lot of players who were under 2,000 FIDE. So that's why it sort of spiraled into the National Scholastics in the spring in a weird way.
Okay, yeah, I was part of some of these email threads around that time. I didn't realize the extent of the problem. But the upshot is that, you know, once the dust settles with FIDE ratings, we are going to be updating the conversion based on what the current relationship is. You should be aware, though, that any of these conversions are not going to be, super exact because there really is no like one-to-one relationship between a FIDE rating and a US chess rating. But we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, I don't think that we're looking for an exact, for every player. I don't think that was the point. It's just when it gets so far off that we know that something is wrong, right? It's like if it's off by a little bit for almost every player, that's one thing. But it was going off by like 200 or 300 points for players, and that's where.
And it could be, just to be clear. I mean, it could be that like if a player's USCF rating is like really stale and their FIDE rating is very fresh, and so they've, they're just like so much, their FIDE rating is so much higher than the USCF rating, even when you do the conversion. That is not anything wrong. It's just that the US chess rating is stale.
Yeah.
This is
or the reverse situation. I mean, either way.
This is anecdotal, but one of our club players who is, approximately 11, USCF 900, went to Paris for the summer, has obtained a FIDE 1415 in 2 months. If you do the calculation, that's USCF 1700 under the new formula.
Okay.
That's a bit off. That's more what I'm saying. And Mike Hoffbauer 2 days ago was saying that it's now caused 30% of the players they were looking at to trigger a manual review for like rating balances, as opposed to a previous like 5% or less.
Okay, yeah. So maybe it's somehow out of date. We'll have to check out the conversion then.
Yeah, I would use this year's Spring Nationals. Just ask Mike for the database of that, so the ratings committee can review just how it affected a lot of players, and we're talking thousands.
No, I believe you. I don't know if we have to have it like thrown in our face.
No.
I mean, we could do the conversion. I guess the point is that like, we know what to do. We'll actually do the conversion between current FIDE ratings and current USCF ratings for players who have both of them, determine the conversion, and then we can update the formulas. That would be the plan. So I see we're running up against the hour, and I want to be mindful of people's times. It looks like I'm not going to be able to discuss the variance measure, except to say that the variance measure was requested by the executive board, and this would end up being a measure that just like the peak performance rating would be an extra measure that would accompany just a player's rating, just giving an indication of how much variation there is from tournament to tournament. So that's information that I have posted online, but I'll have to figure out somebody to share my PowerPoint slides, which have some nice graphs. Tom, did you want to weigh in?
I quickly just posted it in the chat there, where it says from the rating PDF there of how to get your floor adjusted. So it does go to it goes to the USCF office. Apparently it goes to Renee.
So is this on the website?
This is on the website. The rating formula PDF that's everyone's supposed to be looking at. That's quoted directly from there. So it does give the opportunity for someone who's on their floor to change it, to make a request to the office and then say, hey, they look at it and adjust it appropriately.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Caleb, I think you're next.
Yeah, I remember at last year's rating committee workshop, there was some discussion on creating ratings for Fisher Random chess. Is that still on track?
Haven't heard
Um,
anything new on about that. So
Okay.
I think that's still on the shelf.
All right.
Yeah. So no progress there. Michael?
Yeah, can you send around again? I haven't been in the loop much. The current variance algorithm and stuff.
Sure. I have, I can actually put in the, did I actually put that on my website? I don't know. Hold on. Let me just check really quickly if I put it there. Yeah, I did. Let me copy this into the chat. So if you go over here, you'll see the variance proposal. You're not going to get nice graph examples though, although maybe I can put that in the same area. But if anybody wants to grab the variance proposal, they can just grab it there. Any other issues before we close shop for tonight? All right, well, thanks everybody for attending. I appreciate the lively discussion. It's very helpful. Sure we'll have a lot to think about over the coming year. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.